So happy to be here.
Oh, happy
Um,
to be here with
and
you too.
that's right. In our first segment, super excited to be talking about this really important topic that we've kind of been talking about all week, I think. But let's kick it off. We got some questions from everybody that we can go through together. And if anybody has any questions while we're talking, feel free to drop them in the comments, and we'll have a little bit of time in the end to answer those if we haven't answered them throughout the live. So let's start. Let's go through, I think, the most important thing, which is what is a Spanish first child, right? And what does the Spanish only stage mean? Um, I'll start saying what it means to me, Maria, and then you can kind of tell us what you think and your take on it. To me, a Spanish first child is a child that's been spoken to mostly in Spanish, either from one parent or both, since they were born. And so this is a child that is now speaking mostly Spanish in their early years and picks up English later. So their first language is Spanish in that early stage. The Spanish only stage is that season where they're understanding English and they're learning it, but they still haven't spoken it outwardly. So what do you think about that,
Yeah,
Mari?
I agree with you 100%. And, I'm going to give you credit for this because when I raised my kids, I didn't have a term like Spanish for kids. I used the one parent, one language, as you know, before it was called one parent, one language. So this is all new to me and it makes so much sense. And I think it helps parents to kind of understand where the child is at and also understand the compromiso, the intention and the commitment
That's
that
right.
they made to raise a bilingual child with Spanish first. So I love it. I think that it's your term from now on. Wherever I go, it's Otto came up with this, and I totally support you 100%, and I
Thank
think
you.
it's great.
I just think naming it really gives it really changes the tone, right, to what we're doing and really makes it like validates it and makes it um intentional,
Yeah,
right? Because a lot of the times we're kind of caught up in these strategies and kind of fumbling through it because we don't have a manual for it. And so we're all doing our best. And when that pressure comes in, I think it's really important to have had a name for something that we're doing and kind of stand strong in that instead of saying, well, yeah, that's just kind of how it worked out. We spoke Spanish to them and then they started just speaking Spanish first. So I think it's so important to name it, validate it, and do it with intention. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want. Like language development is not linear. And I think it is very much normal for one language to come before the other, especially when they're little. And if we can make that be the minority language, so much more power, right? And so much more important and valid for long-term bilingualism.
it's also giving us a term to talk to our kids about. Like you say, we can name it. We can say, "This is what mommy and daddy are doing here in this house. We speak Spanish only," and I just it really works. We're going to talk a little bit later about, family members and the circle of the child's, in the child's life and, how also that term is going to be really important in that as well.
Absolutely. Somebody asked us, is it okay if my child only speaks Spanish for a while and one they fall behind in English? And so this is goes back to the Spanish only stage that we're talking about. And so the reality is no, they will not fall behind because English is everywhere. And that's why this is the part where I think it's most important to stay strong because this is when the pressure comes in, right? Our child's only speaking Spanish, and we talk about it all the time. They go to the park and kids don't understand them. They may be starting preschool or kindergarten. And so we have all these like outward pressures that start coming in. And the interesting thing is that if your child is understanding English but choosing to speak Spanish, that's such a win, right? And so it's so important to kind of reframe that because English is everywhere around them. And so what a testament to the work that parents would have done at that point if the child is choosing to speak Spanish only, right? So what is your take on that question, Mari?
Um, I just, I still see this, and I saw it about 25 years ago when I was raising my kids. I still, in the communities that you and I belong to, especially in Facebook, where parents are still concerned about the Spanish at home, only Spanish. They're never going to learn English. Even in the radio segment, Billy and I have calls that come in quite often, and the abuelito or the tía or whoever it is that it's calling is saying, no, pero es que no van a aprender inglés si no le hablamos en inglés también. And it's like this fear. And studies have shown that that's not the case. We have so much data that proves the opposite. So much education today than we had, 2.5 decades ago. But there's still that concern, and we just need to continue, accounts like you and me, we have to continue pressing, y predicamos, como dice Rebecca, yo predico. We have to continue that and inviting the community to really go and look up this articles that have appeared, that the studies that have been, have been around for a while now, where raising a bilingual child, the advantages and the benefits, and especially in the United States, they're gonna have
yes,
like outside that door, everything is in English. It's gonna come so quickly that before you continue to worry, they're gonna be coming home with sentences in English and all
and
that. So
fast. It happens so fast.
We're all going to be like, oh my God, this is, and so continue with the Spanish. The English es sí o sí, lo sea. Y va a venir súper fácil, y va a venir en oraciones claras, y no va a haber confusión. Así es que les aconsejamos que sigan con el español primero.
Y por eso también me gusta decirle a la gente como protect that stage, right? Because we rush through it por lo mismo, por la presión, ¿no?
Y no, se va muy rápido.
Y ya pasa? Que se va, es mucho más difícil dar la vuelta, y ya tienes a los papás de niños un poquito más grandes that start saying, okay, well, now what do I do? Because they won't respond, right? They won't respond in Spanish, and they won't, they understand it, but they won't speak it. And so although there is a component of, as a child, like wanting to fit in, there is a component of that, and that, that has to be dealt with in other ways, with friends that speak Spanish and putting them in circles with other families and family members. I think there's still a very big piece of not rushing English and not rushing to introduce it, really.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it will happen and automatically, like like a robot. Really? They're going to learn right away, and it's in there, especially if one parent speaks English at home. Yes. The child is learning the Spanish. It's going to come out. I saw this very clearly yesterday when you and I met, and I was talking to Jonah, and he went from English to Spanish. Okay, the boy is 5.5 years old.
Yeah.
And he was perfectly, and he is being raised with Spanish only at home. And the English was there. I mean, some sentences came out in English because he would hear my husband speaking English, and he was taking from that conversation and would say something as perfect sentence in English. I was like, okay. So and oh, here's Olga. Hola, Olga. Okay, Olga, it says Lucia. Lucia, it says Olga.
Mucho gusto.
You guys to each other. Okay, that was my big fear, that my girls would stop speaking in Spanish. Y mira, is a guru of bilingualism.
That's right, and that was her biggest fear. That's right. But it's interesting because I went through that pressure, myself. Like, I went through that stage. My husband does not speak Spanish, and so I went through the pressure of even my own mom, who doesn't speak English, telling me, well, are you gonna speak to him in English so he can talk to his dad? And I think it really matters here to be grounded with your partner, whether they do speak Spanish, and know that what you're doing is okay, both speaking Spanish to the child, and you're there's no pressure, or whether your partner speaks English, and there is going to be a period, a gap, of you're going to be translating, you're going to be helping them communicate, right? And it is so short-lived though, and so worth it. I tell parents all the time how short-lived it is, because they get scared. They're like, they hear that and they're like, whoa, what does that mean? Like, they're not going to be. And children communicate perfectly fine regardless. And if anybody else's partner is like mine, they've been around me, my partner's been long around, my husband's been long around me long enough to know some, like, the basics, right? So although my child speaks a lot more Spanish than him now, there was always like the basic understanding of what my child needed, and what he needed to get from him in that sense. So I think it's absolutely worth it, to see it through to the other side.
Yes, that that commitment, that I just love that. I mean, you're a great example of that, how supportive your husband is. Erin Vulcao, my beautiful blender, I mean, her husband too, and she has kids from different age groups, and I just so wonderful when you have that support from your partner, because it eases you don't feel like, oh my God, all this pressure. And, that's when the mental thing comes in. And when you're feeling like frustrated and you feel like you don't have support, that
Mm-hmm.
support, even if the person doesn't speak the language,
That's right.
feel that support, it makes such a difference.
And I think there will be times that, it will be shaken, because we can all go into it kind of saying we're going to do this, but when you're in it, uh, there are times that you need to kind of like go back to your why together, and why you're doing this, and why you want your child to stay connected with both sides of the family. And even if you both speak Spanish, I think there's always a need to reconnect and be like, okay, let's remember why we're doing this. Or if they go to the park again and their child isn't like, that shakes you, as a mom that wants their child to thrive. I think that really shakes you. So always go back to your why, and always remember, like, it is very much short-lived. Like, don't be afraid, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I have another question that I want to, and I want to ask you first. So how do I set us up for success if I want to raise a Spanish first kid intentionally?
Um, well, I always tell parents that a family plan helps. I'm a planner, so I have to like have everything organized. List every night before I go to bed. I have my to-do list of what I need to do
That
the
makes
next
sense.
day, and that helps me.
Right.
I It helps, like, there's a few of us que predican el family language plan, and I love it. I love that. You know, Rebecca has ella lo llama plan lingüístico familiar, yo le digo family language plan. Me parece que Kat le llama también
Sí.
language plan as well. And I just think that it really can work to the family's advantage, specifically because there you have all the strategies there of how you're going to do it. You're not going to be like waking up in the morning and say, okay, so what am I going to do today? No, you already have this, this plan. The method that you're going to use, it's included in there. If it's one parent, one language, it's minority language at home. It's time and place, whatever it is that works for your family. Because every family, we can say this over and over, every family is different. Every plan is going to look different. I wish there was something that you and I could give parents that say, here, use this, and it's going to work for you.
I mean, I always kind of say the same thing. Like, whatever is going to work for you long term is going to be the best plan to abide by. For me personally, what worked the best is to just speak Spanish to my kids everywhere, right? And so it didn't matter if, and it doesn't still, if we're outside of the house, in the house, at the dinner table, even my husband's there, he speaks English, I chime in Spanish, he chimes in English. Every time I'm speaking to my children, I like to say that I talk to them as if they didn't speak English. That's how I talk to my kids, right? And I don't know if it's because I got stuck in the translating stage, or it's just a language that I have established with them, but I talk to my kids as if they didn't know English. and that has helped me um, stay consistent. It has helped me stay on track. It has helped them understand that with me, that's the language that they speak. I've never translated for my kids, and I happen to know it is counterproductive to translate for your children in terms of you're speaking to them in Spanish and then you tell them the English right after that. So speak to them in the language. A lot of people will also say, well, that doesn't feel natural to me, right? So the language, their language doesn't feel natural to speak to their child. And what I would say to that is take a chance, because I think you can also grow in that, right? It doesn't have to come natural right away, and you can always start small, but kind of grow from there.
Right. And that's your strategy and that works for
Yes,
you. But I'm going to share that because it can work for other people.
that's right.
And maybe someone else has a different strategy and, uses a different method. And, maybe she or he, they do it only at lunchtime or only if they go to the park,
Yeah.
but everybody has their own little ways, and as long as you stay consistent with whatever that is, that's going to help with the language learning, and it's going to help the child. Kids they're all about routines.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever routine you have, from brushing your teeth, I always tell parents that it's like you your kids brush your teeth and they know this 3 times a day or maybe twice a day, but they do it every single day.
Right.
So every day, the same thing that you're going to do with the Spanish, it's you do it every day the same. They get used to it. They know that from the moment they wake up in the morning, they speak Spanish. And it's very natural, and you know, there's no question about it. It just happens, and it's part of their daily lives, and
That's right.
it becomes it's something that they do because it is what they do in their house.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's right. And there's an interesting aspect to this, because you also see a lot of parents, and I talk a lot about this too online, is you see a lot of parents that are embarrassed or feel rude speaking Spanish in front of others. And I invite those parents to really think about who they might be inspiring instead of who might be judging them. Because I can't tell you how many places I'm super loud, but I can't tell you how many places I've been around moms that maybe they speak French or Portuguese or even another language, and they speak English around me because they feel like I'm not going to know what they're saying, and they feel uncomfortable, and then they see me speaking Spanish to my children and they switch. And I find that, like, it's almost like you're giving them that permission to be like, I don't need to know what you're saying, like, you do your thing with your children, right? So I feel like let's reframe that also and say, okay, maybe I'm not being judged, I'm inspiring somebody else and giving them permission to do it too.
yeah, positive, negative. It's like, and I think attitude is so much, and I learned this the hard way. I learned this. I didn't have the confidence that you had because I didn't have the support. I think that's what was one of the main reasons. So I would feel embarrassed, and the people that would look at me in the park and say, what the heck? Why are you talking to your kids? This is America. This, speak English, and I would feel like I would close up instead of, and now we know so much more. And like you say, I never thought about that. It's like, wait, I could be inspiring someone else that is also in the park with their child and speaks, I don't know, Russian, and
Yeah,
she could be speaking in Russian.
I've seen it happen countless times, and
Yeah.
honestly,
So I think taking that positive spin to things helps a lot.
a lot of the times I think we're more in our heads than like we realize, right? So I think it helps to kind of have a little bit of that confidence, right? And know that what we're doing is the best for our children, and that's what we want at the end of the day. So that's another like drop in the bucket of building that foundation in Spanish for them.
Yeah, and it's your child, and no one has the right to say to you, don't do
Right.
that. You have conversations over here. It doesn't have to be like, think sometimes we feel like, people would think that talking about them or whatever. And I'm like, no, you have
That's
to be here with your kids. It has nothing to do with whoever is over there and whatever conversations they're having over there. Pero hay gente que se mete a veces, and, te dicen cosas y te sientes como que, oye, but no, just be confident,
mhm,
have a good attitude, always knock at our doors for support. If
absolutely.
an opportunity or an occasion comes up and you didn't know what to say and you want to make sure that you know what to do next time, always ask. We're here to support you 100%. And we might not have all the answers, but I've been around long enough that I can give you all my 2 cents
Mhm.
because I've seen it all in the last 2.5 decades. So I think that's why you and I are a good combination. You're in the midst of it right now. I've already been there, done that. I'm your second mom now because I adopted you with your parents' permission. Yes.
That's right. That's right.
So, and you're my son's age, so it's like I know that you know so much has happened in the last 3 decades, and
And we've come such a long way too, right?
right,
Honestly.
and there's things still, like Olga would tell you, there are still things that are not perfect, but we're getting there. And I think with people like her that they work so hard to to make bilingualism a success, and this dual immersion programs and the oral, she talks about oral C a lot, and I know you're into have the child being biliterate in
Mhm.
to just the language, but making sure that they read and
Mhm.
they write it. I think that all of that really helps today's parents raise their bilingual kids.
That, and also I feel like giving them the resources to do that, right? Because it's there's so much out there, you know, thankfully. There's so much more out there, I should say. And although we have a ways to go, there is so much more out there. So really being able to package those things together for parents, I think is uh, such a wonderful way to say, I see you and I'm here for you. And here are the things that can make your journey easier, right? So I'm glad that we're here. All that to say. Let me read the next question that we got. It says, how long does the Spanish only stage usually last, and when should I worry? So I like to say it really depends on the child. Some kids, I say, start, even though they've been speaking Spanish, start speaking English by 3 or 4. Others, not until they start school. It really depends also on what's going on at home. I feel like a child who's been in a one parent, one language home will probably pick up English if that was one of the two languages. Yeah, a little faster. But at the same time, the key is really, your child, right? Are they understanding? Are they communicating? Are they absorbing the language? You can usually see it in the child. And so if you're ever unsure, there's so many bilingual SLPs in our community, right? That we're happy to direct them to. And so amazing that we also have that available and people that can help us and reassure us in that journey, right?
Yes, and that what you said is key. Every child is different, and for example, some kids they are taken to preschool before, or the child care centers where there's going to be more English.
Mm-hmm.
So, that child is going to pick up faster than a child that only hears Spanish all the time. So also, younger siblings will start speaking English sooner than the older siblings. That is so true. Yeah, I was
Ways.
going to something about siblings earlier as well. Like, the older sibling goes to school and then
And
comes
picks it up.
speaking
Mm-hmm.
English and would want to speak English to the little child,
Mm-hmm.
the younger sibling. So, ahí hay que estar un poco pendientes, kind of redirect in it, like with love, redirect the language. And
And we will have a separate episode about this
yes,
because there are so many nuances to the sibling relationship and dynamic, I think, but really important to kind of expect that, right? Expect that the second in consecutive children we're gonna be speaking less of the minority language just because of the exposure to the older children. But not only that, I think what I love to talk about is techniques to help parents to help the siblings speak Spanish to each other and establish that as a language between each other, because it's such an underrated minority language exposure. I think it's such a support for the parent who is typically the only one speaking the minority language to the child. So again, that's an episode that we will have coming in the coming months, but so important to expect it and know how to get ahead of it also.
I agree.
Yeah. So here is our last question. It says, can I raise a Spanish first child if Spanish is not my first language?
I say yes. We have proof in our community that people are, whether the partner speaks Spanish or not. So I think that it can be done. There's a lot of resources out there that can help. Some of the women in our community, I say women because that's the two names that come to mind. They're non-native and they are raising bilingual kids, and they also are bilingual teachers that teach Spanish, that have been exposed to Spanish all their lives or the better part of their lives. So and they have the degrees to support what they know. So I give them a lot of credit because, that's a lot of courage, and it takes someone that loves the language to be able to go to school and learn it so she or he can teach it. So I think it's definitely a thing that, it can be done. And I support that 100%. I think I take my hat off to anyone that went to school for however many years to become a Spanish educator, and whether that person is native or non-native.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key to that is not letting the fact that you don't speak it perfectly hold you back, right? Because I think kids don't need perfection, they need consistency. And there are so many, like we're talking, there are so many different resources to support us now, even content. There's music, there are podcasts, there are books, right? So I think you can use all of those other resources to support language learning in the child so that wherever you fall short, the child is absorbing and kind of like filling those gaps, I like to say. So I don't think there needs to be that much concern in the perfection aspect. But I said the same thing. I say, yes, absolutely. It is absolutely possible. Here, my daughter is 3. She used to speak more Spanish, but now her friends speak English and she switches. She still understands both, but she feels more comfortable speaking English. So we will have a live specifically about this because this is exactly what we're talking about. I think as parents, we get caught up under the pressure of wanting to introduce it too early or switching to English around others or uh, asking the family or not asking the family to speak only Spanish to our children. And so all of those things like throw the scale off balance, right? And the more that happens, the easier English becomes to the child and they default to it. Kind of like as honestly as parents, like if we're tired and that's a language that comes to mind first, we default. It's a natural thing to do. So we will have a live about this, Paulo. So thank you for the question. But I think to support you in the moment, switch all of your content to Spanish if you haven't already. Speak only Spanish to your kids. I know both you and your wife speak Spanish, so I know that's like, I don't know what the dynamic is at home, but now more than ever, to keep those scales as balanced as possible is to just speak Spanish to her anywhere, everywhere, as family to do the same thing and be consistent. Like, you have to be consistent for the child to see that as kind of like a normal part of your relationship.
Right. Don't panic and don't feel like, oh my God, all my work is going down the drain. It is not. And I also want you to think that you need to validate that this is okay in front of your child, because she can't help going to the park or going to play with her friends and her friends don't speak Spanish. So
That's right.
that's all okay. So I think what Lucia is saying is, once she comes back inside the house, we continue with our Spanish talking and our Spanish viewing and our Spanish music and all that, and that helps. And just remember that this is just temporary.
Mhm.
Pretty soon, she's gonna know. She's only 3. She's gonna know that when she walks in, everything at home is in Spanish. So don't put that pressure on yourself. Don't put any pressure on her. Do not criticize. Do not be mad, or don't act like, oh my God. No, no, no. Don't do any of that. Just very natural. Continue speaking Spanish.
I have a I have a recent post that I made on this that I think we forget about, because we bring a lot of playfulness into parenting a lot of the times in those difficult moments, right? To like brush the teeth or take the kids to bed. And I think it's so important to bring that into language learning too with our children, right? So something that, and I talk about it all the time, so that works really well with my son. And Paulo, this might work for your daughter because she's at that age too, where I like to tell him, for example, if he switches to English, I'll be like, ay, pasaron a este robot a modo inglés. Voy a apretar el botón para que pase a modo español. Entonces, exactly.
Okay. I wanted to ask Olga, if you're still here, I would love for you to comment on this. If you have any suggestions for Paulo. But I like your play.
I just think the second we start putting pressure on it and making it this thing,
an issue. Yeah.
there's just more resistance. Think about it literally like wanting to brush your child's teeth. What's going to work better, to hold them down and brush the teeth and kick and scream through it, or be like, play a game, let's play a song about it? Or that's always, connection is always what works for children. Yes.
Child next to you. Well, it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. And so I feel, and also it helps them associate the language with love, and again, and that like playful parenting, which is also so important for a lifelong relationship with the language. So I think yeah, exactly, we cannot force our kids to speak in Spanish, but we can nudge them back into the language. And again, we can always model and be consistent ourselves, because our children are watching us, right? And they see the value. They see the value in bilingualism. If we talk about it, something that also really works with my child is when people compliment her for speaking Spanish, or when he hears other people speaking Spanish and he can understand what they're saying. I'm like, isn't that amazing that you can understand what they're saying, or you can talk and speak back to them, and you couldn't do that if you didn't speak Spanish. So I think let's point those things out to our children, that are the beauty of us knowing that language. So exactly, look, Olga just said I had to switch my strategy and showed them how amazing it was that they spoke 2 languages. Exactly, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's so important to point that out, because children will feel pride, and they'll start to switch. They'll start to understand, like, you know what? Yeah, that's kind of cool. Like, and somebody told me that how cool it is that my son goes. I mean, he did it yesterday to you. Like, I'm bilingual, and he likes telling people that, and they do feel pride, right? Like, instead of making it something that they have to hide in order to fit in, let's make it something that they're proud of, since they're really young, so they want to show it off, right? It's just like how children work, and I think that it's so exciting to them.
Plus, eventually when they're older, that pride is going to show in so many ways, including culturally. I mean, that's one. We want to connect the dots with this culture here. And I think that, what you're doing is amazing, and I love it. And I think that, we all need to be kind of lower our expectations, just continue doing what you're doing, and you're going to see those little moments happen. The little moment yesterday when Jonah is talking to me in Spanish, and then he hears the English, and then he says like just very like a little sentence in English. I was so proud of him. I was like, whoa, this is what it's all about. He goes back and forth and doesn't even, bat an eye. And that's what we want. We want that, that relationship with both languages and with the understanding that, Spanish is my first language here. And so I just think it's we go back to the attitude and make it positive, make it fun, make it routine.
And it's not to say that if you start older, it's not going to work, right? That's not what we're
Oh,
saying. It's just going to be a very different approach at that time than what we're speaking about, which is Spanish first and having them that be their first language, right? So I I think that'll be a conversation for another time as well, but I think it's important to point out people ask all the time, oh, is it too late? I didn't speak to them. I want them to, or they're interested now. It's absolutely never too late.
yes.
But it is easier when they're in that period of absorbing language for the first time. And so if that's our language and we're already speaking, let's speak to our children. Like, why, let's do it.
Well, I gotta say, when they're little, they don't understand the benefits. So for me, it became about establishing a bilingual identity. El inglés domina, and we can't battle that. Lift up Spanish. Exactly. You have to lift it up.
That's right. That's what I mean by we can only balance the scales because, and I have a graphic about this because there's so much kind of weighing against us. There's extracurricular activities, even for those of us who homeschool. There are so many classes our kids are going to attend, and friends they're going to see, and friends are going to make, and books at the library, right? And story time, and the movies. And so I feel like it's on us. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it is on us to balance those scales and tip the scale as much as possible in the favor of the minority language.
Yes. And it's never too late. And I know we're going to talk about this at some point, but I have an example that I always give the last few years when I talk to parents. My Puerto Rican friend Frances, her son started at 4 years old. And he's 13 today, and he's completely bilingual. He speaks all languages perfectly, and so it's never too late. So,
absolutely not. So,
yes, you do. You start.
Well, I was gonna say we have a lot of super fun episodes coming up. We're gonna do a lot of a few back to school episodes. Which are super important because there are so many doubts and perspectives, I feel like, around that. And we have homeschoolers, we have people sending their children to dual immersion school, people sending their kids that only speak Spanish to school in English. So I think it's really, really neat that we can touch on all of these topics, talk about siblings, talk about household dynamics and how those affect language. We're going to be talking about the holidays when the time comes, and we're going to have a lot of really fun guests and people that all of you guys already know. So I'm really excited to kind of bring in their perspectives on these topics and get everybody's questions answered, because at the end of the day, the more that we can be reassured in what we're doing, the easier it makes our journey, or at least the more confident we can be,
right.
and kind of keep on keeping on, if you will, right?
Exactly. Your friend says also culture has a lot to do in my case when she experienced being in Mexico, eating, walking, breathing in the country. I do agree. I think that connects a lot with them. Creemos que no lo notan, pero sí lo notan. Mis hijos igual. Yo iba a Puerto Rico todos los veranos por 12, 13 años corridos, 2 meses ahí. Ellos, desde que se levantaban, estaba el olor, el sabor, las conversaciones, la música, o sea, todo,
Y además, si uno tiene la oportunidad de hacer, realmente de viajar a nuestros países y llevar a nuestros hijos, qué mejor, right, than to do immersion, because that, I say, like, even immersion around family and other kids that speak the same language, I think there's nothing more effective, even for adults, right? There's nothing like jumping in with both feet, so nothing more effective for everybody involved than to be in the country that speaks the language. So if you can keep doing that and take her for long periods at a time, I think eso la va a ayudar más que nada.
Sí, absolutamente que sí. Y yo nunca lo hice, pero lo pensé, y si lo pudiera hacer de vuelta, lo haría. I would have had my daughter go to high school in Puerto Rico with her cousins because they're all about age. Y lo pensé como por 5 minutos y como que después, me puse a pensar todo lo negativo en vez de lo positivo. O sea, pero entonces me tengo que ir con ella y qué voy a hacer aquí, quién se va a quedar mi esposo y con mi hijo. En vez de decir, ¿sabes qué?
La oportunidad.
Pareja, le voy a proponer, y yo tenía familia, estaba mi mamá y mi papá, estaban todavía allá, así que, if there's, like our friend Jessica is doing, she's taking her kids to Mexico, quizás por 2 años, quizás por más, pero qué maravilla que esos niños van a estar rodeados de español solamente por un buen tiempo.
Y realmente establecer esa base en el idioma que siento que es tan importante y tan really so foundational. I mean, it really is what it is.
Homeschool Aventura, her son started at 4.
¿Ves? Es realmente nunca es demasiado tarde. There's always a way, and I think it's just to me in my mind is the older they get, the less practice that we have also, right? And the more that we kind of have to do to bring that into the child versus when they're little, we just have to speak it.
Exactly.
And that's to me is like the easiest way to go about it. Siento.
Agree.
Bueno, Mari, gracias por estar aquí. Gracias a todos. Gracias por sus preguntas y sus comentarios. We'd love to hear from you. Our next episode is in a couple of weeks, and we're going to be talking about kind of who's part of this community, who's part of this bilingual community, different walks of parents of moms, I should say, that are part of it. The same kind of thing we were just talking about in terms of moms that speak Spanish natively and moms that don't. And how that has affected their journey. And we'd love to hear your questions about that. But thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Besos.
Bye, Mari.